Spider-Man 2 is kind of like X-Men 2. The first movie was flawed but entertaining, but the sequel's a lot better. I think Spider-Man was a little bit of a better movie, though, and Spider-Man 2 follows suit by being even better than X-Men 2. By the way, there are a few different versions. The one I watched for this review is called Spider-Man 2.1. There are a few extra scenes here and there, and one scene that is slightly different, but for the most part, it didn't add anything, and I'd say just stick with the theatrical version. Anyway, it's a few years later, and Spider-Man now has to contend with Dr. Octopus, a scientist whom Peter Parker looked up to, but in an experiment gone wrong, he was caught in an explosion, and the mechanical arms that he used to be able to work with dangerous materials and environments fused to his body, also destroying the inhibitor chip that stopped the arm's advanced AI from messing with his brain, as the entire thing is grafted right into his spine. Peter also has to deal with personal issues. He's still in love with Mary Jane, despite telling her that they can't be together, and she's now in a relationship with his boss's son, an astronaut. It seems that, though she's just trying to bait Peter into jealousy, and it almost works, especially as his powers start going on the fritz due to his lack of confidence, and he loses his will to be a superhero, eventually reverting back to normal. But he realizes he's the only one who could possibly stop Dr. Octopus, who was on a crime wave trying to steal enough money to recreate his experiments. Spider-Man stops him, so Ock decides to just take the materials he needs from Harry Osborn, who offers what he needs in exchange for Spider-Man, who he blames for his father's death. Peter also has to deal with his aunt's financial problems and the guilt over the part that he played in his uncle's death. He's basically forced to tell his aunt the truth because he can't bear her blaming herself over it. There's a lot going on, but the plot itself isn't really that complicated. What makes the movie good is the subtleness of it all. It's almost like a study on awkwardness. Peter is an awkward guy. He was a nerd in high school. He's got really weird powers that were an obvious metaphor for puberty. He's in love with a girl who clearly feels the same way, but he also feels his responsibility means he can never have this sort of relationship. You feel for the character. He fights off his personal desires because he wants to be a selfless hero. But there's so much bad luck, derision, and awkward moments thrown at him. For all the good he does, you feel that he deserves to be happy. And after a while, he feels that too. And eventually, he just gives up. Did he make the right decision or the wrong one? Well, it's kind of open for interpretation. The movie also did not lose the breezy sense of humor of the first movie. Even though it's still pretty serious, there are enough funny moments peppered in there. The main reason that I can't recommend watching the 2.1 version is my favorite scene was replaced. In this scene, he's stuck riding down an elevator of a tall building because he was swinging on a web and his web power stopped working. He's stuck in an elevator with a guy and they exchange awkward elevator conversation. It goes on just long enough to be cringeworthy in all the best ways, but not long enough to beat a dead horse. In the updated version, the conversation is completely different, with the guy trying to sell Spider-Man on the idea of branding himself. It's more played for laughs than anything. Oh well. Alfred Molina is great as Dr. Octopus. He radiates an inherent benevolence in the beginning, but then he's quite convincing as a cold, insane villain later on. The two aspects are both done really well. If I had to fault the movie for anything, it would be that there's a few times where the director, Sam Raimi, put a little too much of himself into the film. Like the scene where the surgeons try to remove Doc Ock's arms and he wakes up and kills them all. It suddenly becomes the sort of over-the-top B-movie horror that Sam Raimi has done with the Evil Dead franchise. But only for one scene. Every single thing about the scene, from the way it's acted to the way it's shot, does not belong in this movie. That being said, though, Spider-Man 2 set a higher standard for superhero movies at the time, and it does come highly recommended. I'm going to give it a 9 out of 10. Maybe I'll cover the other two Spider-Man movies one day, because I have a lot to say about those.